Hello to our freaky family. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Kandi.
And this is Sips of Crime. Welcome back, everybody, to Sips of Crime, your favorite true crime podcast. I was about to say, where are you, Kandi?
I'm in my own little world today. We hope you guys enjoyed the last episode.
What have you guys been up to? Kandi, what are you doing today? What are you doing after we...
Nothing. I have to go home and let my toddler play, so he's not terrorizing my house.
Oh, I see. That sounds
We
like
took him on the boat yesterday. And
Oh, you went on the boat yesterday? That's
Yeah.
fun. It's been gorgeous recently. The weather's been killer.
It was nice for April, but the sun would be out for a minute, and as soon as you would get warm, the clouds would cover it, and then it would get cold because we're moving on the boat. And he started getting really antsy. Like, we might have been on the water 45 minutes, and he starts getting really antsy, like wanting to jump around and unzip his vest. And I'm like, okay, pull to like a little sandbar. We got to let him out. He got in the water. He played. He was good. Didn't last 5 minutes after we loaded back up.
Out.
And it was done.
Out.
Yes. So,
Love those naps.
Yeah.
Well, we have an exciting episode for you guys today. We are actually hosting a guest for our podcast who has a crazy story for us today. We've got Casey on the podcast with us today as a guest. So, Casey, what have you been up to recently? How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you guys for having me.
We're super excited.
I've just been cramming here. I know the deadline was coming up to make sure I had all my ducks in a row for this. Finished a book on it, and I've been watching documentaries and taking some notes here and there. I hope not to have to rely on them too much because I want to go from here.
Oh, you're going to do this episode from your memory.
I'll try. I don't. Some things I'm going to have to refer to, but we'll see how it goes. I do have notes, so if I get lost, I got something to refer to.
Awesome. Well, we also, our guest has also been extremely gracious and has provided the wine for us this episode as well. So we're actually going to let Kandi's going to pass the torch and let him do the introduction to what we're going to be drinking today.
This is a bottle of 2021 Golden Hallows Reserve. It's from Jolo Winery. It's a local place down the road here. I picked it up Friday. My wife and I went there a couple years ago for her birthday, and we did a tasting, and we really liked it. And I actually had a wine picked out for this, and I went there, and they said, "Oh yeah, we don't have that anymore."
Oh no!
And it's in the same looking bottle.
Mm-hmm.
It was the same price range, and I'm thinking, "Oh, this is it." And I looked on here, and it looked a little different. I went and asked the lady, and she said, "Yeah, the one you had before, we don't do that anymore." So this is it's a Chardonnay blend. Viognier. Oh my gosh, Viognier, Pinot Gris, and Treminette. The word they kept using was buttery, and it was.
Oh, we love a buttery Chardonnay.
It was very good.
Have we done a Jolo before?
No, and I actually have not been here, so...
Oh, you haven't even been to the vineyard?
Nope.
Oh,
nice.
Yeah,
it's nice place.
We'll
Very
have to
pretty.
take a
bunch
trip
of pictures.
Very
and I
pretty.
know
Well, they come to the wine festival every year.
Oh, okay.
And so you've tasted some of their wines.
Probably.
But they do specialize in a dry wine. They're a bit more upscale as well for the area. Mm-hmm. I mean, they really are very proud of their wines, but like Casey was saying, for a reason. Well, let's go ahead and get it open and give it a try. He brought a very fancy wine opener that I have never seen before. The professional wine opener.
Got it from Sam's Club.
Check it out.
Yes,
check it out.
They were doing a whole presentation on it. My wife had to have it, I guess.
Had to have it. Have you used this thing before?
This I have used.
Okay.
This I never have. This I didn't. I don't. It looks like a cigar cutter to me, but yes, this I have used. So I'll make sure I got her in there. And I'll show you how she works. Give it a couple pumps, and it'll come off like kind of like a champagne cork.
No.
Yep.
I know.
My bad, ladies.
Wow.
There you go. I told you it was like a champagne cork. So.
I mean,
it's so practical, though. I mean, quite honestly.
Is it hard to push down though?
Once
it gets in there?
Yeah. No. It was No. It just that last pump I could feel, and I don't I didn't. Yeah, so
I loved it. That's
but anyway,
great.
you
might have to invest in one of those.
do it one less pump next time, and you can take this and you can pull up on it,
and it'll come out.
So like this will push the cork, and so you just
and
pull.
the pressure. Okay,
right. I did a pump too many.
So
tell me when.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Kandi's a bit of an overboard as well.
Yeah, I am.
I'm always like, okay.
Tell me when, Kandi.
You're good.
So now, I know that you had said that you aren't huge wine drinkers, but do you have like a particular, like, let's just say that you were to go to the store and grab a bottle of wine for something. Do you have a favorite? Do you have...
Jolo has a decent blend, a white blend that they have a white and a red blend that's up here at our local market, and I think they probably run at like maybe $35, maybe $32. It's not too expensive. Those are decent, but other than that, I mean, I don't know. I really don't drink a whole lot of it. I couldn't tell you anything about it too much. I can tell you if it tastes good or not, and I think that this does taste pretty good. The white blend that they have is pretty good. I don't think I've ever bought their red, but red makes me more nervous than white. I'm
normally a little bit more alcoholic as well.
Yeah, and they're just when I think of red, I think dry, and I'm not there with my taste buds and my
Yeah, you're right around.
I'm a novice.
You're right around the same palate as Kandi, and she's not a novice. And she still doesn't love those dries. No. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers. So it is sweet.
Oh, that is very refreshing.
That is really good.
You guys, that's perfect for summer.
Mm-hmm. They have several.
I can get the fruity taste.
I do too. I get all of those fruity notes, and it is a buttery Chardonnay base for sure.
Yep.
12.8% alcohol, everybody.
Yes.
Well, along with this fantastic wine, you've also brought us a story. So whenever we first started our podcast, Casey had came to us and he says, if you guys ever do a guest episode, I want to do this case. And we said, okay, we'll definitely put it on the back burner for you. And
because we weren't sure how this was going to
We didn't know if we were ever going to be in the position to even have a guest or if it would last longer than a year. But so, like I said, we're super excited, and we'll let you kind of give us a deep dive into what you're going to be covering today.
So, we're going to be covering H.H. Holmes.
Bum, bum, bum!
He is kind of widely known as the first recorded serial killer in America. Obviously not the first, but first in modern times. And he's got a pretty fascinating story. He's pretty eccentric, which they all seem to be. They all are. Yeah. They all have their quirks, so I originally heard about him from anybody that knows me. I'm a big Leo DiCaprio fan.
Yes.
He has a movie that's coming at some point on the back burner that has to do with H.H. Holmes.
Okay.
It's called Devil in the White City. It's based off a book that was written by Eric Larson. Same title. Devil in the White City.
Okay.
And when I heard about the movie, I said, well, let me check out the book. And it's up here at the library. And when I went up there, the lady was like, oh, this is a great book. You're going to love it. It's very gruesome, but it's very good. And the book is kind of a good blend of, the true crime part of it, but also about how big and, kind of extravagant the 1893 World Fair was, and I'll kind of go into that too, and how it all kind of plays into how he got his start and how he kind of racked up the bodies by the end of it, and so yeah.
One of the things that I always find interesting, because like you were saying, he was one of the first recorded serial killers, but even the term serial killer wasn't coined for, because
the 70s.
Yes, and so it's just very interesting to look back on some older cases like that. Well, grab a glass,
grab a friend,
and let's dive in.
So H.H. Holmes, he was born Herman Webster Mudgett That's his original name. It's an ugly name.
I was about to say, I would have changed it too.
Yeah, H.H. Holmes is much prettier.
Yes.
Born May 16th, 1861. I believe he was born in Vermont, Connecticut, somewhere in the Northeast up there. I can't remember 100%. From what I've researched, it's so long ago. So what it's hard to keep record on some of these people, but especially their family, their mom and dad, who typically are normal people. But kind of I like to find out where it all kind of boils down to. A lot of these guys have mommy issues.
Oh yeah.
Dad is typically a lot of the times he's kind of a hothead, but not always abusive. A lot of the times he's not there. What was Dahmer's dad was like that. Wasn't very abusive, but just wasn't there.
Right.
Kind of for that mental, especially that a man needs a dad,
a role model,
that kind of stuff, and when mom has to pick it up sometimes, especially when you're dealing with some of these kids that have, they're typically awkward, they're typically weird,
borderline autism,
stuff like that. And this guy was the same way. Holmes was kind of a quiet kid, didn't really fit in, got picked on a little bit, but what I've heard is that his family was religious, very religious.
Okay. That's another trend.
Yeah.
In a lot of our cases.
Oh yeah.
Very religious families.
Dahmer's dad was very religious, still is. But a lot of the times when you read on it, some people want to attribute that to growing up with the heavy hand type deal. I've read one report that his mom was kind of abusive. Then I read another report that said absolutely not. She's just religious. If spanking is abusive, whatever.
I was just getting ready to touch on that, because what we consider abuse now is not what was considered abuse when we were children.
Yeah.
And we...
Much less the 1860s when he was born.
Exactly, yes. Exactly. Yeah. So we touch on that a lot, whereas, because we were spanked as children, and I would never in my life say that my parents abused me. But now, if you spank your child, you're borderline, getting into that territory. And I do too.
You gotta kind of look over your shoulder. Don't want to do it out in public. Make sure you get them home first. But anyway,
I will flip on someone that even says anything to me.
But one thing I did that did stand out that I always try and see if there's parental trauma or if there's some kind of trauma. There's typically something that happened at a young age,
like a trigger.
That whether it's sexual with somebody they don't know or somebody they do know, an uncle, a lot of the times it is. Stuff like that. I didn't see anything like that. The only thing I did read was that he was getting picked on by a couple of kids that might have been a little bit older than him, and they were outside of a doctor's office or something like that, and they kind of pushed him into a room where there was like a skeleton there. And they said that maybe he was frightened at first, but then it really kind of took him aback, and he just was kind of fascinated with it. Oh. And that kind of leads into where where I'll go with all of this. But that's kind of where it started. That's the first thing I've seen on record that kind of said there's a trigger. He ended up going to college, 2 different colleges. I don't remember the name of the first. The second one is the University of Michigan. Okay. Went there, got he was an MD when he left. So he was a doctor. But one thing that stood out to me when he was young, and a lot of these serial killers don't seem to. They're not social. They're not people that really fit in. They're not people that are cool, typically good looking at all, anything like that. But this guy was. He was smart. He was a doctor. He wasn't a great student. He kind of was one of the first. What do they say about the? What do you call the last person that graduated last in their class in doctor school? They call him doctor.
Call him a doctor.
That was kind of his mantra. He was maybe the original starter of that. Wasn't a great student, but he's a doctor.
He passed.
Yeah, he did. And they started running schemes when he was in college because cadavers or bodies were so hard to come by. And so they were, dissecting and doing all this different kind of work on all these different people. And one of his buddies in college, and I think maybe a teacher, came up with a scheme to take these people that are already chopped up, take out a life insurance policy for somebody, and then say that this person on the table that's been dead is the person. And claim the money. So that's kind of where where it all began with him. At first I don't know that he was necessarily a killer at first. Mm-hmm. There was a question about a couple of incidents when he was younger. Mm-hmm. A kid died. Him and a kid were playing in like an old abandoned house, and a kid fell. Did he fall? Right. Or was he kind of... I don't know, but there was never any insinuation that happened. And then as he got older, he went to maybe New York, I think, for a little while, and a kid died there.
Okay, so there's
and there was kind of a connection, but he was never...
following him where he goes.
The bodies kind of tend to follow the guy. And so that happened young, and but I think really and truly he was just like a scam artist at first.
Sure,
he just wanted to use these insurance policies to try and make money, and they did. They were taking out $10,000 life insurance policies and splitting it up.
Back then, $10,000 was a lot more.
A lot of money. You're talking 1880s here.
Right.
He had I remember reading in the book, he had a guy working for him for $12 a week. If that puts it in any kind of perspective for you, $10,000 is a lot of money.
$12 a week.
$12 a week. And like that was, I think the guy had a family. So that was like a living wage for a man that had a family.
Sad though, that you can look back on these times and know that somebody was getting paid $12 a week and could provide for their family. And you can't go out to a fast food restaurant
and get a meal for $12.
Right.
People pull up behind you at the gas station if you put $12 in and probably laugh at you, thinking, where are you going to go on $12? Yeah.
To the next gas station.
Yeah, to the next gas station. You ain't going to make it home on $12. I think they might have had a kind of a pushback. Some of these bodies looked a little older.
Okay, so they were starting to kind of catch on.
And so when he got into it later, it became a little easier with fresher bodies. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of where it started. Michigan, left Michigan, moved around a little bit. He worked as a teacher for a while. I don't think that there was really an incident there. I think people kind of reported he was weird.
Yeah.
Which is normal.
It's still a terrifying idea, though.
Oh, yeah. Was a teacher was a teacher for a little while. He was married 4 times.
Wow.
So that you don't really hear that with serial killers. Like I said, they're typically awkward. He was married 4 times. First time... his first marriage, I believe, married to Clara Lovering, and they had a son. So he actually was married 4 times and has 2 children.
Okay.
Had 2 children. And so that was one thing that stood out to me, too. Mm-hmm. Decent looking guy. A lot of people would describe him as good looking. They said he had really very bright blue eyes. Uh-huh. Not a bad looking guy. Kind of short. I think he was 5'7", but I think
he sounds like quite a catch.
Yeah.
To be honest. I mean, a doctor,
yeah.
Teacher, blue eyes,
yeah,
good looking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Almost 6 foot.
Yeah, almost 6 foot.
Yeah, a little under. But yes, married her, had a child. There were some reports that maybe she was kind of well off, and maybe kind of just married her to kind of get through medical school. And as soon as he was through medical school, really didn't have anything to do with her
kind of financial
or the kid.
Stability there.
Right. And so left her and the kid and just moved away. But he ended up settling, and where he did most of his terror is in Chicago. So he moved to Chicago, and that's when he changed his name. He went from Mudgett, which also he was starting to kind of make a name for himself out wherever he was before as a trickster. So he wanted to lose the name Mudgett and try to...
Fresh start.
Gotcha. So he became H.H. Holmes when he went to Chicago. Bought a drugstore. He wasn't a pharmacist, so he had to go and pass some kind of... They call it a bar on something I read. I always thought that was like being a lawyer. But had to pass something like that to become a pharmacist.
Even as an MD?
Yes, I think they're different. I think you have to have. I think there's different.
Well, they absolutely are. But right. I would have. I mean, now they absolutely are. But I would have.
Think back then there wouldn't.
I would have thought that if you're an MD, you could probably administer and give some drugs to people, for prescription. Yeah,
the book I read, like I said, I read the Devil in the White City. I don't think it really mentions it. But one of I watched a couple documentaries and read up, and I think it said that he couldn't just go and open it and prescribe medicine and give medicine out. He had to actually go and pass something.
Now, I want to stop you for just a second. Was there any significance to the name H.H. Holmes as to why he chose that? Did you read anything in your research?
I didn't see anything, and to be honest with you, H.H. Holmes just is the big one, because that's the one he used mostly in Chicago.
So he had a few aliases.
He has several.
Oh,
he has.
I didn't know that.
I think I heard at one point maybe 20.
Wow.
The way it's said in the book is that the husband that owned it was very sick. I've read that he wasn't sick, that he was did kind of a traveling job. And the book really makes it seem like he killed, or the man died and he kind of killed the wife to get the store. But in reality, from what I've read since then, is that both of those two were living in the neighborhood when Holmes eventually dies. So that is not true.
Just some conflicting information
right.
there.
So I think he actually did befriend them. And I think that they just kind of wanted to get out of the business and do something else. Mm-hmm. And so he's a doctor.
Enjoys some retirement.
Yeah. And so when he bought that, he also was married again.
Okay,
early
so he remarried.
He remarried again in Chicago. He would use his wife's names to sign things over. Or use their parents or this and that to try and get these so they're sending letters to family members or people that don't exist. That's why he came up with so many aliases. Like I said, I think he was a fraudster turned murderer
for sure.
And so he remarried again, and I will tell you her name, Murda Belknap.
Oh,
and they had a daughter, Lucy. So he's now had two wives. Never divorced the first wife, by the way. So technically, it's not really legal. But he's got a wife and a son originally. Has nothing to do with them. And now he's married Murda and had a daughter named Lucy. Now there is some evidence that says that he was a little more involved with them. He gets married a third time to a lady named Minnie Williams.
Did he get divorced this?
Never divorced. I don't think it was ever divorced.
Married 4 times, never divorced.
Never divorced. And Minnie was somebody that came in and definitely had money.
I love the name Minnie. That makes me happy.
Yes.
That's adorable.
Yeah. And so when he married her, he was doing side deals and building a house, apparently, for Lucy and Murda. But Minnie's name was on some of these things like that. So there is a little more evidence that he did have more to do with Murda and Lucy than the original marriage.
Mm-hmm. You have to wonder, what makes you, what made him connect with them more, than any of it's...
Maybe age, maybe nothing. Who knows? There was some talks.
Or maybe she was just more financially stable and so he needed to keep her around.
That too. And there was talks of abuse in the first relationship, and that's probably not uncommon for serial killers that can actually have a relationship.
1980. Or wait, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, this is like 1880s, 1890s, late 1880s, 1890s. And now he's opened up this pharmacy, but when he married Minnie, he also bought a lot across the street and down the road a little bit, like maybe a block over. And this is where he built what everybody that knows, or that's read up on him, is called the Castle.
The Castle.
And the way he built this was he just tricked a bunch of people into it. So he would pay a little, but he would also hire a group of guys, and they'd build a couple of rooms, and then he'd get ticked off at them, and he'd fire them, but would never pay them. And so then he'd have another crew come in, and they'd build a little bit, and he'd get ticked off at them, and he'd fire them. He did this until he built
the entire house,
and it's 3 stories, and there's I think there is 50-something rooms in it.
Oh my gosh!
But there are several rooms. There are several staircases that lead to nowhere. There's rooms that have no windows in them.
Is this because of the wonky work that was being done by several different contractors, or is this something that he wanted it? Both. They said it was an ugly building because it really wasn't. Imagine. There was really no blueprints. There was really no architect that built it. It was just kind of him hiring people and saying, this is what I want. Mm-hmm. But it was also a way to cover his tail and not, if you have one set of guys build this house and they, people start missing, you're like, well, I built a house the other day that, had some really weird
you open up a door and there's a brick wall. Right. That was apparently a part of it. There were trap doors. There were rooms, like I said, that have no windows in it. Rooms that once the door closed, there was no way to get out.
Oh my gosh.
He also had most of the house fitted to have gas lighting. So they didn't have electrical lighting, which I'll kind of go into when we get to the fair. That was the lighting. And so all of these rooms have gas that run to them. Mm-hmm. And so there are some rooms that, kind of once you close the door, that's it. And he, turned the gas on. And so, built this castle, eventually got it all up. And
now, how long did that take? Do you know?
I think it was less than a year, something like that.
Now, he hasn't killed anybody yet at this point. That is documented.
Right. I think you're right about that.
At this point, he's been married 3 times.
He's been married 3 times. Yeah.
2 kids, owns a pharmacy, and is now building this house before there's any documented murders out there. Okay.
And the house was, it's not technically a house. They call it the castle, but on the bottom floor, it's shopping. So they had a pharmacy. So he put a pharmacy. He ends up selling his old pharmacy to another guy and says, "You got no competition here. You don't have to worry about it." And then buys the lot across the street
and opens
a pharmacy in there. So he, lied to get this guy to buy it, and then became his competition.
Sure.
Jewelry store, restaurant, I think a couple other different shops. And that was kind of how he was able to get so many people in and out. When the news of the World Fair was coming, a lot of women started traveling to Chicago because there were a lot of typists needed.
Oh, okay, okay. Which was a job back then. I mean,
big time.
That was
stenographers. Yes.
And that was what women did.
Minnie Williams. There's evidence that Minnie Williams was originally she was kind of recruited. He met her originally somewhere else before, and when he got to Chicago, called her, sent her a letter or something like that, and invited her to come out and work for him. He did this with a lot of women, a lot of pretty women, and a lot of pretty women ended up missing during this time. And I think that they had a running total over the fair. It was, several hundred people went missing. Just went to Chicago and either died or it's just hard to keep records sometimes. Sure. And so if they wanted to go somewhere and get lost, you can back then.
And hitchhiking, of course, was 18.
Grab a train and
it wasn't the same as it was as the 1960s, but you could hop a train or hop a
absolutely
so interesting.
He finally gets this castle built. Starts hiring all these young pretty women, and they start coming there and they disappear. Mm-hmm. There was a room that he had fit so tightly that he put a big gun safe or some kind of safe in it. And
now, was this meant to be a home?
No. It was meant to kind of be a hotel.
Oh, okay.
So that was kind of his excuse, is I'm going to have these shops at the bottom. They'll make my money. And then next 2 floors, you can rent out. Or people live there. People there had residents too. So people that actually live there. Which kind of bites them in the tail at the end because they kind of get to know some of these women that he's got working for him. And then boom, tomorrow they're gone. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, what the heck happened?
Yeah.
And his excuse was always they left to go get married.
They left to go get married.
It would be they would talk to him one day, and then the next day they're gone to go get married, and they've never even heard of another man.
Oh my gosh!
Like I said, in the bottom store there was a jewelry store, and one of I think the first documented case is of a lady named Julia and her daughter's name, Julia and Pearl Smith.
Okay.
And they came there with their father, and he was the jeweler. And as soon as they moved there, Holmes kind of had it out for Julia. He had his eyes on her. And like I said before, it's odd because it really is kind of a ladies' man.
Yeah.
For a guy that's a serial killer, and when you think of all these other ones, they're just socially awkward.
Bundy was a ladies' man. Girls loved him.
I remember the one that came and visited him in that they did the whole depiction of that with the Zac Efron movie.
Yeah. That was Carol. That was his wife.
Yeah.
Was it
Carol? He married.
She wore the glasses.
Yes.
And went there and got pregnant, right?
Yes, he married Carol in prison. But before, he got fan mail.
Yeah. Well, Dahmer did too.
Yeah, he was a ladies' man. They liked Bundy.
They all kind of get this kind of the bad boy vibe once they're caught. And then the women, if they're decent looking at all, which Dahmer was okay, and a lot of people thought Bundy was very good looking.
Yeah.
that's kind of where they were like, he's got to be innocent. Look how good looking he is.
Good looking he
but
is, yeah.
even Dahmer wasn't as attractive or as charismatic, but he still got mail of nudes and stuff like that. Yeah. He was trading them in the prison with other guys because obviously he wasn't into women.
Right.
Say what did he need them for? Holmes was like that. So they said he was very touchy-feely, so he would touch your shoulder, and a lot of women gravitated to that, and it wasn't...
Well, back then, a touch to the shoulder,
oh, God, scandalous. My goodness gracious, like showing your ankle.
Exactly. Oh, my.
Yeah, this kind of wooed Julia over, and she ends up divorcing her husband, who moves away.
So she leaves him for Holmes.
Leaves him. And I think there were like promises of marriage and stuff like that. Obviously never went through with it.
And he's still married to Minnie.
He's still married to Minnie, Murda, and...
Yeah, because he never...
whatever the first one. He's married to 3 women at this point.
Yes.
So those are the first 2 murders that occurred. So he did kill Julia, and he did kill the daughter.
Okay.
Pearl. And I believe that there were remains found of both of those to kind of confirm it. In the end, he's only convicted of 1 murder.
What?
1 murder.
I don't know a lot about this story, which is why I was so excited to have you do. Like one of the things that we always do is like whenever we tell each other what case, because we have a case list that we share, and so anytime that we like find something, we'll add something to it, and then whenever it comes up to recording, we're like, okay, I'm doing this one, and I'll say I'm doing this one, so that we don't end up doing the same one from that list. Yeah. But we've promised that we won't research each other's cases, so that we can get So we didn't do any research on Holmes.
I didn't say anything at the beginning either, because I didn't want to give anything away, so we'll just leave it for the recording.
Yes, absolutely. So, okay, so now are you going to go into details as to what happened? So
their bodies were found later on, obviously. I think that they may have found a jaw of Pearl. The book depicts him killing Julia, I believe. The book only does a depiction of 2 different murders, but it's also fictional, non-fictional book, so it's based on real events, but the author is kind of laying out what he thinks happened. Right. But I believe Julia may have been the one. There was like a national shortage of cadavers and of bodies that schools needed, like his own. But also they needed skeletons. So they were paying top notch for skeletons. So what he would do was he'd kill some of these people and he'd just dismember them. Or there was a tale that he brought someone in one time to look at a body to sell. And they had cut her and split her, like they said, like a jackrabbit is what they said in the book. And so they cut her down her face and then just kind of peeled it back. Well, you can't identify at that point. Right. She's, dismembered. And I believe that was Julia.
Oh.
Chloroformed a lot or gas.
Okay.
So he really wasn't like a gruesome murderer. It wasn't, getting the thrill of it, of the chase and of, it was just, a lot of it was a slow burn type deal. So he'd chloroform you.
He seems calculated.
Yeah. Oh, very. And that was one thing I read too, that, people were saying he could have been a very good, businessman and all that stuff. Cause
they all had so much potential.
Yeah. He was really well thought out, and he really, planned a lot of these things, which is probably why he went so long without getting caught. But Julia and Pearl, I believe, were his first 2.
Okay.
Minnie has a sister named Annie, who's kind of like, what's this? Minnie's not very good looking.
Oh.
It says that in the book. Minnie's just an average looking woman.
This is the book talking, not us.
Yes.
These are not our personal opinions.
But, Annie, I think it says in the book that Annie was prettier.
Gotcha.
But she's kind of wondering, well, why is this successful doctor that owns all these businesses and good-looking guy wanting to marry my sister?
Right.
Well, he comes to find out she, has inherited like a pretty good chunk of land in Texas. I think it was equivalent of $50,000, which, we said back then, was a ton of money. And I think shortly after they married, he kind of got her to sign that over.
Gotcha. Okay.
And he had a kind of an accomplice named Pititzel. His last name's Pititzel. It's either Pititzel or I've heard Peitzel. Both. I've heard it pronounced both.
I like Pititzel.
Yeah, Pititzel sounds a little better.
It does.
But had it signed over to him, and then eventually, comes back to him in the end. But he ends up getting Minnie to invite Annie to town. He takes them to the fair. The fair is now up and running. The fair.
And this is go into a little bit of what this fair is, just so
everybody's.
So
the fair is probably, I don't know since then, it's probably the biggest fair in American history. Mm-hmm. It's definitely probably the most influential. Chicago was in in a bidding war kind of with New York. New York was obviously the bigger city, still is. But Chicago ended up winning out. And they set aside a place called Jackson Park and a couple other different parks to build these very big, extravagant, beautiful buildings. They had like maybe 2 years to do it. I think they got approved in maybe late 1890 or 1891, and it had to all be done by 1893. Mm-hmm. And just a big influential. It was to compete with Paris. Mm-hmm. Paris had done the World's Fair a few years prior, and that was when they put up the Eiffel Tower.
Yes.
And that's the big thing. Everybody remembers the Eiffel Tower. That's where that came from. That was at their World's Fair. Well, this World's Fair they were trying to one-up it. They were trying to make a lot of money. And you guys can look at pictures here in a little while of just how big and beautiful these buildings are, and it's really awesome looking and stuff like that. Shredded wheat came from this.
Okay.
Yep. Let's see. There were a couple of presidents that either had shows there or that came to visit there. I think Theodore Roosevelt. I don't remember what he did there, but he had something.
He had a hand in it,
and he wasn't even he wasn't president till years later.
Yeah.
So he was kind of well known, that kind of deal. But the big thing, the long-lasting thing that came that you still see every day that you probably don't know, that came from the World's Fair is the Ferris wheel. That was their big. They wanted to do something to compete with the Eiffel Tower that had never been done before, and everybody just kept coming up with bigger buildings. They said, "Let's just build a tower. Let's build another tower just like the Eiffel Tower, but bigger." And they were like, "Well, that's not ingenuity. You're not thinking outside the box." Well, they finally got a hold to this guy, last name Ferris, obviously, and he came up with it. And yes, and that's where the name comes from. The man's name was Ferris.
Very interesting. I did not know that.
But this Ferris wheel was built with, just tons and tons and tons of steel.
Very expensive.
Huge.
Yeah.
And
not like today.
No. You look at these cheap pieces of crap you see at our fairs. No. This thing, and this is what's going to blow your mind, I think if it was at full capacity, could hold between 1,500 and 2,000 people.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It almost makes me think of when you go to like a mountain and you hop on one of those things and you just kind of go down the lines. Whatever you call those. Yeah. I feel like that's what each of those carts look like, where you could fit like 30 or 40 people on.
Multiple people.
But that's what went around on these things. So at full capacity, I think it was 1,500 people could be on this thing
amazing.
At once. Never once fell over. Never once had it. I don't know that anybody died on it for it to be the first one ever. Yeah. He constructed it from his mind. I don't think that anybody died on it. I think people probably died putting it together. Several people died building these buildings. A lot of them got electrocuted. That they never really used electricity before, and I mentioned that before. They went with the Tesla model rather than the Edison model, and they had millions of lights. So a lot of the people that came to see this fair, I think they said their busiest day hit 750,000 people were at this fair, 750,000. I think they said 25 million people, and I think it ran for maybe 6 or 8 months.
Very interesting.
Like spring through the summer into fall.
Yeah. Wow.
25 million people came, and population back then was minuscule compared to what it is now.
Absolutely. So that's a lot.
Ton of people. And like I said, this is the World's Fair, so they had different countries there to represent and all that stuff. So they had people coming internationally too. It wasn't all Americans that came to it. They had royalty come. There was a big deal about an heiress or a princess that came, and she was just kind of walking among common folks. She kind of snuck off from her
bodyguards.
Her bodyguards, and was just kind of, I think they said instead of going and eating a good meal, she went to the German place and had brats and beer.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love her.
Yeah, she, was kind of a rebel.
Yeah, that's my kind of lady.
Yeah, but so that, the fair was a very big thing. It invited a ton of people to Chicago. A lot of them being women, which is kind of what
perfect hunting ground.
Which is what led Holmes to, a lot of his, dealings with women. A lot of his killings were women that he had, brought in to be stenographers. But also, like I said, a lot of them he groomed, saw if they were worth any kind of money, would put a life insurance policy out on them, or get them to sign over some amount of money with a promise to marriage and stuff like that. He like I said, he was a kind of he was a con man, but a ladies' man at the same time. So a lot of the women really liked him. Going from the fair, Annie came to visit to kind of scope out Holmes to figure out what the heck's going on. Minnie's not very good looking. She's married to this good looking rich doctor who's got all these businesses. What's going on? And as soon as she gets there, what's he do? He woos her. He's but he doesn't. They're non-sexual, so he doesn't go that way. But he does get her to think by the end of it, she's calling him Brother Howard.
He really did win her over,
right? Now, H.H. Holmes does not mean. Maybe his name was Howard in that instance, but Minnie called him Howard.
Okay.
He had a different alias that Minnie knew him by from previously. And she said, he told her when she moved to Chicago, do not call me by Howard. You call me H.H. Holmes. Well, but that's what they knew him by. So by the end of it, Annie was calling him Brother Howard. Okay. And so he took them to the fair. They got to see all the sights and stuff like that. I mean, he paid their admission, paid their food, got them all this stuff, had her there for a little while. And Annie is the other murder that's depicted in the book. And the way it was depicted, which, like I said, I'm not 100% sure if it's all factual. But like I was saying before, he had a big vault. So it's kind of an airtight vault. But think of like a really big safe or gun safe or something like that. But you could walk in it.
Sure.
And he had Annie in his office. And he said, hey, can you go grab something out of that vault for me? And she did. And he closed the door behind her.
Locked the door behind her.
And kind of just sat there. And the way the book describes it, just kind of sits there. Annie thinks that maybe she accidentally closed the door. Sure. She's embarrassed. She's kind of beating on it, trying to get him to come get her. And he's just kind of sitting there taking it all in. And eventually pipes in gas and kills her that way. Ended up getting some people to come. He put her in a trunk and then had her shipped out in that trunk. I think by some movers who didn't know what they were moving or doing.
Oh my gosh.
And he had her convinced that, he was going to send her to Europe to study art. So she was writing back home saying, I'm going to Europe to study art.
So the family's not looking for her.
Right. And so when she went missing, Minnie's kind of asking, he said he was telling people that she'd ran off to London to get married.
To get married. Back to the getting married.
To get married. Yeah. So that was kind of his thing.
Because they all have to leave to do that.
Right.
Nobody can get married in Chicago, apparently. They have to. They all have to travel abroad.
Not unless they marry him.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and if they marry him, they're lucky to get out. But yes. He killed women. He killed men. He killed children. Did them, different ways. There were reports that maybe he bludgeoned a couple he chloroformed. And I believe they said that, if you leave the chloroform, kind of cover it, and they breathe it in so much that eventually that can kill them too. Not just knock them out, but kill them.
Chloroform. I didn't realize that chloroform was a way to.
I didn't either. I thought it was just.
I thought it knocked you out. And
I believe I heard somewhere when studying this that if you could theoretically just keep it applied to them, and he was
eventually the oxygen. I'm assuming
he was buying so much chloroform. He was buying it. The reason we were talking about he only got convicted of one murder.
Right.
There's only 9 that they say are confirmed to him. He confessed to 27.
Oh my God.
But there are people that out there that think that he's closer to like 200.
Wow.
Because of the amount of women and people that went missing that were staying at his hotel over the the 2 years or so that he was there during the World Fair and all that kind of stuff. So that number's never going to be known. Mm-hmm. I think it's higher than 27 that he admitted to. But you know, a lot of these people are going missing. He's kind of, racking up debt. Mm-hmm. There were stories of him borrowing, or he fully furnished his restaurant and never paid for any of it.
Oh my God.
But he just had a way with words that the guy came and he was like, "Hey, I want my money today. I want it now." Mm-hmm. And he had the guy, laughing and stuff and before sent him on his way before he left.
No money was paid.
Never paid him. And so by the end of his kind of run in Chicago, he's got people just beating down the doors. People are starting to pick up, mm-hmm. Police are sniffing around. Before they had a special unit to find missing mm-hmm. persons. So they've got people out on the streets looking for these women, these kids, these people that are disappearing. And this is kind of, at the tail end when he's got people breathing down his neck for all this money is kind of when he decides to bail. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned before, the guy that he was kind of running around with, name was Pitzel, and he had a family of four.
Wow.
I think it's five. It is five. And he decides to go on the run and go down to Texas, where Minnie
has the land.
After Annie is killed, he eventually kills Minnie as well. And then is able to claim the real estate.
Because of the marriage.
Exactly. And so
that's how he inherits that land.
So now that he's kind of worried about all these people knocking on his doorstep, he decides to bail mm-hmm. and go to Texas, where he now owns all this land. And he is trying to bring Pitzel along with him. Well, they're down there trying to build another castle type deal. And that I don't remember exactly how far that got up, whether they really got past the talking phase of that or not. It's not really clear mm-hmm. whether any of it was actually built or anything like that. But he goes down to Texas. He's arrested because he owes someone money, something like that. Speaks to a man in jail who's kind of a lifelong criminal, talks about doing the insurance policy mm-hmm. Fraud on him, tries to find a body. It doesn't work. He's kind of on the ropes here. He's not getting the monies like he wants to. So then he calls Pitzel back up and says, "Let's do it with you. Let's take the claim out on you, and I'll go find a body." He doesn't mm-hmm. specify how, and we'll claim it. We'll take out $10,000 and we'll turn you up. What we'll do is we'll act as if you died in a lab accident. I think maybe Pitzel was one of the guys that he had working in his pharmacy, or mm-hmm. he worked somewhere where dying in an explosion would not be out of the question.
Sure.
So Pitzel, he kills as well. He chloroforms him. They said he gets him just drunk as a skunk.
Oh, no.
And then chloroforms him. And then, while he's still alive, lights him on fire. And goes and turns this dismembered body in and claims the $10,000. But the $10,000 gets sent to his wife and not to Holmes.
No.
So now
he is pissed.
So he's kind of, like I said, things aren't really going.
Yeah.
They're not going smoothly.
All this trouble.
They're not going smoothly for him anymore. And so he's now, I believe she sends him his half of the money. But she doesn't know that it's actually her husband. What he tells him is he ran off to Europe. Not to get married.
I was about to say, did he get married too?
No, he didn't get married. She told that he told her that they faked the death and he ran off to Europe as to not get caught.
Okay,
so the wife thinks that he's still alive.
The wife thinks he's still alive. The wife thinks he's still
somewhere.
In Europe, laying low.
Gotcha. Hoping probably to come back at some point after this
with
insurance
the money, all
stuff.
this stuff.
Yeah, okay,
so she pays, and this is kind of the beginning. Of the
was the plan for the wife to get half?
No, the plan was for Holmes to claim it.
All of it,
but they cut the check for the wife.
So he kind of went in there and kind of like made this deal at some point.
Right.
I mean, his wife wouldn't have just willingly sent.
Oh, yeah, no, he and Pitzel and his wife knew what was going on, so she knew that Pitzel was kind of,
so when the check got sent to her, she was like, all right, I will give you half, but I'm not giving you all of this.
Right. Well, man, the other half was supposed to be for him anyway, so, she did what was agreed upon. Holmes thought he was going to walk in there and claim it all, but instead they cut the check for her. Mm-hmm. He ends up getting his money out of it, but, like I said, she thinks that
he's in Europe.
Comes back to her and he says he's in Europe. He wants to see some of his children. So she gives him, like I said, he's got a family of 5, and he takes the middle 3, Nellie, Howard, and Alice. I think Howard is the youngest, and I think Nellie is the oldest. So that would put Alice right there in the middle. Mm-hmm. And he kind of goes on this countrywide little spree with them. And he's got the mother following. And a lot of these people have no clue. And now that I'm saying this, I do not believe that Minnie is dead yet. I don't have it in my notes when exactly he killed her. But I believe that Minnie is checking into hotel rooms with him. And they're going around. So there was reports of them going to Canada, to Detroit, to Indianapolis.
With these kids.
So they're traveling with the kids. He's treating them fine. They're writing letters to their mother, their grandparents.
My next question.
And he's not sending. He's not sending most of them. Yeah, and that's kind of what does them in the end. I'll get there.
Okay.
And so they're traveling, and he's got the mother following. So she doesn't know that her kids are near. He's kind of bringing her along as well. And Minnie's there. And like I said, my memory's hazy on when Minnie goes, but eventually she does go, I believe.
So does Minnie know that he was doing this whole life insurance policy stuff?
Yeah, is she in on it?
I'm not sure if that's 100%, kind of confirmed.
If my husband...
But she's always thought that he's just a good businessman. Now, what he was telling and everyone at this point, how to get these kids and what these kids were doing with them, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, how do you get away with it?
Right, but he's still writing the mother, and the mother thinks that everything's fine, and he'll let a couple letters go, or maybe a couple letters kind of slip through the cracks. Sure. So she gets a couple letters from the kids.
And you also have to think, Kandi, probably. Back then, it was probably really out of place for a wife to question her husband's business dealings.
True.
It would have been her place, whether it was a legal marriage or not. She thought it was legal. Yeah. It was probably really out of her place to question what he was doing and to ask those types of things. I mean, as we would now if our husbands were to be doing something crazy like that.
Yeah. We'd brought home 3 random children. And we're going to go venture off.
We definitely would have stopped and been like, hey, what are you doing?
What's going on?
Yeah. But back then, it was probably her job to kind of fall in line and to support her husband.
And like I said, I'm not 100% sure where Minnie is and all this, but I believe she's with him. And eventually he kills Howard.
Which is the youngest.
The youngest, the boy, the youngest one. And you can see later on in some of the letters from Nellie to like her grandparents and to her mom, she writes in one of them, Howard's no longer with us. And I don't remember what he said. I don't remember what Holmes said that he did to Howard, like how he got him. How he kind of convinced him that, we dropped Howard off with so-and-so, or we sent him here, or whatever. Yeah. I don't really remember exactly what that explanation was. But Howard was the one that died first. And then
do you know how?
I want to say gassed, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I know that eventually... he keeps going from town. He did not kill Howard in the same place he killed the girls. Mm-hmm. Howard was killed in Indianapolis, I believe. The girls were killed in another state. And eventually he does kill them both. He locks them both in a trunk naked and then eventually gasses them. Now, it's one of the reports that I heard, which I'm not, they're kind of conflicting, and it's such old, data. But I said earlier that he didn't seem to really, be into it sexually.
Right.
But then these girls are naked in
a trunk.
And so there was that kind of talk, whether that, went on.
Do you know if that was maybe the only time where one of his killings ended up?
Well, a lot of the women he did sleep with. A lot of the women, he kind of, brought them in. Yeah. Exactly. And so a lot of the women, it's not clear whether it was a sexual thing for him, but...
Well, the killing doesn't have to be sexual, I guess, is the point. Like, right. If part of your con is to woo a woman, that's not really part... you're probably not getting your rocks off while killing her versus where you're actually enjoying the sex part of the relationship. Yeah. So you have to kind of think about that, too. But, these are kids. That's a whole different ball game that you're talking about and a whole different type of person.
Yeah. And apparently he treated them well all the way to the end. A lot of the letters, they were talking about how good their meals were and that they were doing this and that. And he wasn't abusive or anything like that to them until it came time to do the deed. But that was, I believe the girls are his last two murders. He gets arrested again for stealing a horse.
For stealing a horse, of all things.
Something like that. He ends up in jail. And then his name kind of starts popping up.
They're starting to put the pieces together.
Some of these people that are wanting money are like, hey, this guy's kind of a con artist, this and that. And while he's in there, they bring on a detective, and he starts going around the country, and then they go to the castle, and they find all these bones. They find them buried in quicklime.
So he left the bodies in the castle.
Well, they weren't, not bodies. Bones,
remains,
stuff like that. So I forgot to mention this earlier, when he first built the castle, how he disposed of a lot of these people and how he disposed of Howard, it comes back to that at the end. He lied and said that he was a glass blower. And so he had this big, he had this big furnace installed in the basement so people wouldn't know. And he had somebody come in and specially look at it and say, "Can I get it up to this kind of heat?" Mm-hmm. And he was saying, "I'm a glass blower." And I think he even opened up a company that was named for that. And they found remains in there. Gotcha. They found remains in quicklime. They found some in some vats of some.
So he really didn't
chemicals.
even have a disposal method that stayed consistent either.
Right. Yeah, he was kind of just all over the place. And when they eventually went back and found Howard, he had burned him, but it was in a much smaller stove, so it didn't really completely, turn it all to, and so they were able to find his jaw and identify him from his teeth. The detective's kind of hot on his heels now, and he's discovered all of these, these weird things at the castle. Well, a couple of days after that, once they find all this stuff, the castle gets caught on fire.
Oh, of course it does. Yeah. How convenient.
Yeah, and it never really says how or who, or did Howard get the message out, or did he have a trickster that he was running around with there that said, "Look, if this ever happens, go burn the place down," that type of deal. It didn't completely burn it to the ground. I think the building actually stayed there for many years after that.
Just incinerated?
No. I think they rebuilt part of it. But I think the goal was to try and burn the place to the ground to kill all this evidence. Yeah. And that was, they were able to go in there and find a lot of these tunnels, and there's reports of of places where he could kill somebody up on the third floor and then kind of drop them through a couple of trap doors.
Oh my God.
Hang them and drop them down to get them all the way to the basement where he could dissect them and all this kind of stuff. And he was taking and selling a lot of these bodies and the skeletons for money, and nobody questioned it because they needed all these bodies and they needed all these skeletons.
They were happy to have them. They
had real life skeletons hanging in rooms. They weren't
in classrooms.
They didn't have fake stuff back then. They weren't making fake. Right. So they have real life skeletons. That's a person. Hanging in a lot of these places, and that was what he was doing. He was, like I said, a fraudster turn. A lot of these people were killed just to either claim the insurance money, get the bones, or whatever, Now,
do you know roughly how much that would have yielded him? If he were to sell a body to a college or to something for medical research, do you know how much roughly that would have yielded him a piece?
I think they did say, I'm not sure exactly what he was getting for each body. I know it wasn't a small amount of money because they were in high demand.
Right.
But I think I heard or read at some point his net worth or the amount of money he may have had was between $250,000 and $300,000 between property owned and cash and assets and stuff like that. That's a ton of money. Just go back to the $12 a week, reference. Yeah, just think about how much he was worth at that point. But it wasn't a little amount of money. He did a lot of this stuff for a lot of money, and for as much money as he had, just didn't pay anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what ended
up. It all.
That's really what did him in the end. He owed people money. It kind of got his name out there for being a trickster, and then they started going through the property and they found all these bodies.
And once he's in jail, they all know where to find him.
Right, so. Exactly. So once he was there, he never really got out. And while he was there, he wrote a memoir. He wanted to get the memoir out to the presses before they really started digging in and getting all this information, because he wanted to get his story out there first.
Told by him.
Exactly, to try and persuade.
Yeah.
And when he finished writing it, he told him, send it to New York, send it to Chicago, send it to the big outlets. We're trying to spread this word here. And he blamed the killings on Minnie. I'm like, that was why I was what was registering to me. I don't remember when Minnie died.
Yeah.
Or if Minnie even died. I don't recollect now. But they said, he said, look, go look at my logs at these hotels. I'm checking in with Minnie.
Yeah.
These kids, if Minnie...
She's there.
You guys are saying... And now I'm going back. I think Minnie is dead. He said, you guys said Minnie's dead. Well, she's checking into these hotels with me. How's she dead?
Yeah.
And he may have been with another woman at that point. That could be what it was. And they were using her name. But anyway, that was kind of where it went. He wrote these memoirs, tried to get his story out there, and then boom, the bodies start popping up. And this detective, he's running around. He's trying to locate. They're trying to find these 3 Pittsell kids. And once their mother finds out, oh, this guy's in jail, and he's saying
he's supposed to have my kids.
He's saying he was sending my kids to Europe with my husband.
Yeah.
Well, now she's finding out my husband's dead, and now they're looking for the kids. Well, they find the girls. He had each of these cities he was going to. Like I said, he was bringing her along behind them, staying here. At one point, he had them all staying on the same block. And they didn't. Nobody ever knew.
Nobody knew it.
And so these kids are writing letters to their mom, and she's right down the road. And they have no clue.
How terrible.
And the detective's going back, and he's starting to look at all these logs, and that's where they found out he used so many aliases and stuff like that. So they're searching for every known alias he has, and they find logs to some of these hotels, and they show them the pictures, and they say, "Yeah, that's them. They were here." He had 3 kids with him at this one. So now they know, okay, Howard was still here. Howard's still here. And then boom, eventually they're checking in with 2 kids. So now they know, okay, they're in this city, and now Howard's not here anymore.
So they have a place to go look now.
And then he would also rent houses. So he would go and get a hotel room, and he may or may not stay in it, or he may have somebody stay in it, and then he would go rent a house too. So they're checking with realtors and stuff like that. Well, they end up finding one. And all these neighbors are kind of coming out once his name's in the paper and all that stuff. These neighbors are coming out and they're like, "Oh, I saw him. Yeah. I saw him. He was out here."
Yeah, we know.
Well, one of these realtors said, "Yeah, he came up to me and he said, "Look, I want the keys to this house. I want to rent it." And he paid him like the deposit, like he was actually going to stay there, not just like a Airbnb or something like for a night. He had paid, in advance, which is unlike him because he doesn't typically pay people up front.
Right.
But he. The guy recollected, and he said, "Yeah, he got this house for me." Well, when he was there, the neighbors remember seeing a big, large furnace brought out.
Oh no!
And that was, I think they left. He left the furnace there eventually. That's where Howard was killed and burned. And then Howard was found after the girls. When they found the girls, they did the same thing. They found a house that he had rented and found went down into the cellar and started digging around in the dirt, and they found a soft spot and then dug up. There were the 2 girls. That's where they found out they were naked and all this stuff. And it was pretty gruesome. I think they said they went to reach for one of them and kind of ripped the scalp off type deal. And that was how her mom identified her, was the way her hair looked. Yeah. He's kind of done in. And but like I said, in the end, he was only found guilty for killing Pitzel, the father.
Pitzel was the one he was convicted of.
That was the one he was, even though he killed the whole family, except for the mother.
So I'm assuming it's because... So there's a couple of different reasons that court systems will pin a murder on somebody, even though they're well aware that this was not the only one. And it really all comes down to what they can prove.
What can you prove?
In court. And so whenever you have a really, really strong case against one, murder suspect for one murder, they go with it because a murder sentence comes with life in prison or possibly a death penalty.
Not back then it didn't. It was you got hanged.
Period. Point blank, you were done.
Yeah, it was
but as long as you could prove that one, it really wasn't necessary to go in and do all of the extra legwork and to, but now we put so much value on giving the families closure and, so much, but it's just crazy to think that, his track record could easily have shown multiple, hundreds. And then I'm assuming you're going to go into confession at some point. I'll let you continue. Please
so he, like I said, Pitzel was the only one he was convicted of.
Pitzel was the one he was convicted of.
And I believe the way that happened, his wife identified him only by his teeth because he was burned.
Yeah.
And so it was confirmed that he was dead. Now, when that happened exactly, I don't remember where in the timeline. But you got to think, this woman's now found out her husband's dead and 3 of her 5 kids. But once he was found guilty, then he kind of changed his tune, and that was where the 27 number. So there's 3 numbers that kind of associated with him. He was convicted of 1.
Right.
There's 9 confirmed that they found either the bodies, they found bones. They found whatever evidence, either at the castle or they found the girls in Howard's jaw. And then they had Pitzel. So I'm guessing those 4 and then maybe 5 more at the castle that they could definitely confirm. Now there's reports of him dumping bodies in the river. There's reports of, so that number, even 27 seems high. In my heart, I think it's higher.
Well, whenever you think about all of his different, because like you had said, he didn't have a method.
He's all over the place.
Like you were saying. So, who knows how many there really could be because there's no one disposal method that they can follow.
Yeah, I think it was, like I said, I think it was more than 27 just because of the amount of people that went missing. And it was hundreds during the fair. But it was, a lot that just went missing that, like, it's documented. They worked for him for an amount of time.
And some sort of contact,
yeah. And it was like, oh yeah, we saw her one day and she's been living here a while and then boom, next thing you know, she's gone and he says that she's moved to Europe to get married. That was his story so often. So I tend to think it's higher, but the 27 number is also in question because some of the people he admitted to killing are alive.
What?
That are on that list are alive in the end.
You're kidding.
So he's admitting. So even to the end, he's lying.
My God.
Right before they're about to hang the guy, he's still lying. So who knows? We'll never know. But they did. Like I said, he was convicted of the 1.
Which was enough.
Which is enough. Back then, that was enough. that was enough. Even, you couldn't get that in Chicago today. But convicted and sentenced to death by hanging. That was where he kind of that was when he came out with the confessions. He's got a pretty famous quote that was like, "I was born with the devil inside of me. I couldn't." He said there was nothing I could do. It compares himself to like a poet. Says like the poet is drawn to. He says sing instead of write, but he says I couldn't help to kill, they can't help but to write and sing. That kind of stuff.
Same.
Yeah, same. Yeah, that was kind of his thing. He said he thinks while he was in jail they started to look like the devil. He says I'm starting to look like the devil. I think and it's weird because they hang him right. It doesn't break his neck, so he goes out the good old fashioned way. And they said. And everything they say the word twitch, which I think twitch is a terrible word, but they said he twitched for 15 minutes. 15. So they said his body twitched for 15 minutes, and then they pronounced him dead 20 minutes later. So you got to think of just sitting there
watching somebody suffocate. Pretty much is what it was.
People used to line up to do that.
Oh no, we did an episode on the history of the death penalty.
People loved it.
If you haven't listened to that episode, you should, because it's a good one. Because we go all the way back for like actual convictions. So like if you were found to have committed a crime, and we went over some of those crimes that you could be hanged for, or but it was such an interesting thing because
isn't hanged a funny word?
Hanged. It sounds wrong.
It's so weird that you don't say hung. You say hanged.
Yes,
you were hanged.
We talked about that too.
But we did talk about how I believe the term that we used in that episode was a jovial event.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a carnival. People would sell hot dogs and
popcorn ready. Yeah.
Before and I mean,
kids be out there.
Yes, on their shoulders. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's a very interesting episode. We did a lot of research on that one. People would take souvenirs. Mm-hmm. So get
a lock of hair or something like that.
Clothing.
You guys,
part of the rope.
I'm sure part of the rope. I'm sure you guys have done the Lawson family.
Yes, that was our first episode.
There's a report. I've read the book on that. There's reports of
White Christmas, Bloody Christmas.
The Meaning of Our Tears.
Yes.
The new one. Oh, my wife Brittany has a signed copy of that.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, she's myth author. There being blood on maybe the floor or the porch, and somebody had swept it off into the snow, and somebody went and scooped up the snow and put it in a jar to keep it.
They had a cake.
The cake with the raisins on it. They used to take they said by the end the cake would still sit there, but it wouldn't have any of the raisins on it because they would pick the raisins off.
Was still there.
They eventually had to put the cake in glass so that people would stop picking stuff off of it, taking souvenirs. But people would take parts of the rope that this person was hanged with they would give them, and they would hang them on like their fireplace mantles as a souvenir. It's insane.
It's like going to a movie and getting a movie poster going on with it, or whatever action figure.
I could not imagine now
doing such a thing.
On a whole family event.
Yeah, taking my kids, getting a hot dog, and
snacking on my hot dog while this person's dying.
And twitching for 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Live in a much different time.
For sure. I'm glad that time is.
Yeah, that could go. That could go.
That can stay.
Yeah, that could go. Yeah, I think we're a little soft in some areas, but that aspect could go.
Yes.
But yes, he was hanged, dead, requested that his body be buried in 10 feet of cement, which they obliged because he was afraid of grave robbers. It's funny that this guy who is known for killing, for flaying people, for some, I think there's some, I think there's some reports of dissection and stuff like that, which,
But he didn't want to go out that way.
There's a whole.
I'm surprised he didn't give his body to research.
No, he's a little selfish. He's a little selfish, kind of selfish guy.
Did the whole dissecting or cutting them or whatever come from med school and them dissecting things? And
well, that like a lot of the kids that grow up killing animals, like Dahmer, and dissecting them and stuff like that. That's kind of where it all starts.
That your trigger be interested in it?
Like I said, I think they're trying to say that the first trigger was him first seeing that real life skeleton in that doctor's office, and that kind of just stuck with him from then on, because he was really, it wasn't all about the killing to him. It was about let me get the money out of it, but let me cut up on it. Let me tug and pull here and do this, that, there. I will say, while we're on the topic of dissection, and this is off topic. Well, it's not off topic, but it's there is a fun conspiracy to Holmes and his connection with Jack the Ripper. Did you guys do an episode of Jack the Ripper yet?
We haven't done Jack the Ripper yet. That's going to be a two-parter because he's heavy.
Yes. So Jack the Ripper, was confirmed. I think five deaths. And he's very fascinating too.
He is.
But so
fascinating.
I can't remember.
And they still don't know who the hell he is.
Well, so there's a whole documentary from the great-great-grandson, or maybe it's great-grandson of H.H. Holmes. I told you he had two children. I don't remember if it was the boy or the girl. But his great-great-grandson or something like that swears that he's been doing all this research and that he thinks that Holmes is Jack the Ripper.
I have heard that theory.
The theory is he uses so many aliases. Yeah. And there's a period, and I don't remember if it was before or after he'd gotten to Chicago. There's a period where he kind of just disappears. There's no record of him. And so, it's kind of like the lost years of Jesus when he goes from kid to 30.
Yeah,
What happened there?
Where was he?
Where was he? Well, there's a log from Europe. I think it was in London, right? Where he did all the killing. I think it was London. There's a log of someone departing there during that time period using one of the aliases that Holmes has. And they always said that Jack the Ripper had to have some kind of medical background.
Yeah.
Now, the whole documentary, it was just it's like a 8 or 10 part series. His whole thing was that he thought that Holmes faked his death in the end and that he wasn't actually buried there. Well, come to find out, they did bury him. Once they busted through the concrete, they found a coffin there, but it was empty. And they're kind of like, they're freaking out. Well, then, and come to find out that he was under it. Now,
he was under the empty coffin?
Like there was another one underneath there.
What kind of bullshit is that?
Something along the lines of that. Now, that could have just been put in there for dramatic effect. Exactly. To make you think, and then they cut the commercial and then they come back and said, no, he's really here. They did DNA tests and it was him.
Okay.
They said because he was buried in concrete that he was very well preserved. His clothes looked brand new. Still had a mustache on his face. That type deal.
Well, nothing can seep in there.
Right.
It doesn't,
right. Yeah. You don't decompose the same way if you're like
buried 6 feet under regularly.
I think they said that about Abraham Lincoln. I think they said once they dug Abraham Lincoln up to move him, it really didn't look like he decomposed that much. It was a fun documentary, but it is weird that there's nothing on paper for him for that long, and then that's the same exact time that Jack the Ripper is over in London.
And then you're sending all these people to Europe to get married.
What I was going to say about that was,
maybe he spent some time there.
Jack the Ripper wrote letters. And that's good.
Well, they did. One of his things was they found some old Holmes letters, because everybody wrote letters back then, and they did comparisons of the handwriting, and they thought it was close enough that it could be it. And they also don't know.
There was a couple of copycat letters.
There were copycat letters. They think that the original
Jack the Ripper.
They think that the real original one was the one that says "from hell."
Yes.
And then eventually they had a bunch of copycats. And then eventually sent somebody's spleen or one of their organs in one of the letters to prove, hey, here it is.
Yeah.
I am the real deal. This is me.
And one of the things that was really telling about Jack the Ripper was that, whenever he wrote these letters, there were some that were, documented. And then there was another one that they thought was the copycat because the letters start referring to his wife as a whore and all this stuff. And he never spoke about her that way. Yeah. And so they're like, why would he all of the sudden switch over to calling his wife all these terrible, Inuit? It was just really strange. But H.H. Holmes doesn't seem to be into writing about his crimes and sending this information in. Very interesting.
Yeah, kind of the same type deal where you hear a lot of these serial killers go back to the scene of the crime, that kind of deal. They kind of like to stay in the fold of it. They want to make sure they want to see, how people are reacting, and that gives them their own kind of rush. But anyway, I just said that because there is a little documentary. I don't remember exactly where I watched it, but it's not very long. But it does prove that it was that the guy is related to H.H. Holmes, and that he was actually killed and buried there. But they don't think it was Jack the Ripper. But there is a little fun conspiracy there.
Yeah. Well, I think you did a fantastic job. Like I said, I didn't know anything about this case. I had, chosen not to look into it because I knew that it was something that you kind of wanted to bring to us. And so, all of the information.
Make me want to go, and I want to read the book.
Yes.
So, fact checkers out there, I probably got some names mixed up. I don't have everything written down. I'm doing most of it out of memory. But, yes, the book is very good, and I'll tell you, do either of you have a library card? Mm-hmm. Okay. If you go to the library, it's there, but also there's an app on your phone that you can download. It's called Libby, Libby, like my dog.
Oh, yes.
And if you can register at this library, and I think because they're all Cardinal whatever libraries, that you can register at a couple others and you can listen to it. There's an audiobook. That's how I listen to it. And you turn up to about 1.2 and it takes maybe 11 or 12 hours to listen to it. It's like a 15-hour book.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about this a lot on a pod. We're avid readers. I'm a audiobook person. Kandi likes a paperback.
Now I will
Paperbacks
say,
put me to sleep. That's the only thing I can do.
I have gotten into audiobooks.
I know, and I'm so happy.
But usually I will have a physical book and an audiobook. Got to finish one. Like if I physically read a book, I will then go to an audiobook.
Yeah. But for like a little break.
Yes. Yeah. But I have found that, especially working from home and stuff, I can listen to an audiobook in like a day.
A day and a half or so. Yep, that's how I am. I'm the same way. I love listening to my audiobooks. And you can find both of us, Kandi and Michelle, on Goodreads as well. So definitely go and follow us on there. But yeah, we love to do our audiobooks and so we're definitely going to look at it. Just for everybody, say, what was the name of everything again? The book?
Oh, Devil in the White City.
Thank you. Okay. And it was by?
Eric Larson.
Okay, good.
Eric with a E-R-I-K, I believe.
With Eric, a K. Eric with a K. So yeah, we'll definitely have to check that out. But like I said, I'm just blown away. I mean,
the book is more into the fair, I think, and they called the whites. They built all these really pretty buildings, and they made it. It's almost like Washington D.C. They got the big white pillars and stuff like that, but they called it the White City because they're all white. All the buildings are white. They're very pretty, and so and then in the end, he calls himself the devil. But it's a very good book. Good book.
Well, like I said, you guys definitely go and check those out. We'll post some pictures. I'll chat with Casey a little bit and figure out which pictures he thinks are the most significant to post with our episode. But yeah, definitely an extremely interesting story. And thank you for all of the research that you did. No, it was a pleasure having you on.
Yes, maybe we'll the yummy wine.
Yes, the wine was fantastic. Maybe we'll bring you back for Jack the Ripper.
I can do that.
And maybe we'll tag team that one and do something fun with that and come up with some crazy theories around that one because like I said, that's an unsolved one. So, well, again, thank you guys so much for sticking with us this long. We're so excited that we can finally do these guest episodes with you, and we'll definitely have more of them coming. We did kind of preface this as kind of what it would look like for our Patreon guest episodes. So we're going to give you guys kind of a little taste of what that's going to be like going forward, and we will again tell you guys when you have the green light for that Patreon. And we're just super excited to continue to bring you guys more content and more episodes. And again, thank you so much, Casey, for coming on and telling us that riveting story and for the fantastic wine. And I hope you had fun.
I did.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Yes, we'll definitely have to do it again.
For sure.
I'll be back. Yes,
we'll be back.
Y'all just let me know when.
So we hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we will see you guys in 2 weeks.
Bye.
You can join our freaky family both on Instagram and Facebook and find all of the featured photos from this episode at Sips of Crime.
Check out our website, www.sipsofcrime.com. There you can get to know a little about us and stay up to date with our monthly newsletter. We love connecting with our listeners and enjoy sharing your personal true crime, paranormal, or just downright funny stories. So submit those through the form provided on the website.
You can also help us grow our freaky family by sharing the podcast with others. And of course, let's not forget rocking our merch.
Thanks for listening.
Stay alive.